Okay, before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge all my mentors, past and present. It's because of their contributions that we are able to sort of move ahead and work ahead, and some of them are here today. So it's a pleasure to talk in front of them. Um, any sort of multidisciplinary team discussions, it's always good to keep an open mind because there will be different concepts we are coming from or different schools of thoughts. And in an emerging field of science, it's not unusual. So it helps to keep an open mind to allow ideas to be exchanged. Just a brief overview of what we're going to look at today is we're going to quickly look at the red flags in running, then the risk factors, and touch upon training load assessment analysis using ACWR, which is acute chronic workload ratio. And then hopefully by the end of it, you get to add a few more pointers to your history taking or subjective examination for runners. So what are red flags? Red flags are signs and symptoms that make you go stop and refer before you sort of go ahead with your assessment or treatments. These are signs that demand immediate action to prevent sort of any progression of the musculoskeletal or systemic pathology. These are indicators which will help clinicians differentiate from those training related effects from medically significant conditions. The primary benefit is though it's to provide a safety net for both your patient and the practitioner. For the patient, from a point of view of it sort of doesn't harm them any further, and for the practitioner, it sort of safeguards you from any sort of potential medical legal issues. So just to quickly look at the red flags that you need to be aware of when it comes to running. Pain is quite context dependent. So if you have someone presenting with pain at rest or night pains, on the background of a duration where it's been there for a few days, or on the background of trauma, then you want to sort of stop and investigate and refer before you sort of treat or assess them further. Anyone presenting with bilateral severe leg symptoms, in addition to let's say battle bladder dysfunctions or saddle anesthesia, that should sort of ring alarm bells, and you should start thinking on the lines of cauda syndrome. It's not a physio case; it needs to be referred onwards. Someone who has a past history of cardiopulmonary issues, or who is presenting with symptoms of shortness of breath, unexplained fatigue, unexplained breathlessness, need to be referred first. If you have someone who's presented to you with unexpected weight loss, let's say in the range of 5 to 10% of their body weight in the last few months without actually trying to lose weight, should make you think. If your athlete sort of is complaining of chronically low energy levels, you need to start thinking on the lines of relative energy deficiency syndrome. And finally, if someone has had history of seizures, or is a known case of epilepsy, I mean, you don't want someone to have a seizure when they're running. You need to stop, refer, get it cleared before you sort of train them. Referrals should be categorized into 3 categories. So same day referrals are referrals where you stop and ask the client to go back to a medical professional, get it looked into on the same day. So if someone presenting with signs and symptoms of cauda syndrome, or someone on the background of trauma has rest pain or night pains, it needs a same day referral. Urgent referrals would be ones where you sort of tell them, you need to go to a medical practitioner next day, on a couple of days, get it looked at. So someone with signs and symptoms of cardiopulmonary issues would sort of fall into that category. Planned referrals are referrals where you sort of you can take your time and go back, get it assessed, and then come back to you for training with a clearance. So someone who has a past history of seizures, or is a known case of cardiopulmonary issues, or has family history, would fall into that. Now, what's important is for professionals to have clear and dedicated referral pathways. It's mandatory, it should be feasible, and it should be frequently practiced, so it becomes a part and parcel of your day-to-day life. Especially physios who are freelancing, it's essential. It's a must-have tool in your sort of toolkit. Referral pathways will usually be a network of great radiologists, orthopedic surgeons, physicians, neurologists, and psychologists who sort of refer back and forth and try to help your client. But what's important is for a system to be in place where you sort of understand each other's lingo, because from practice, you'll understand that physiotherapy language seems to be a little different compared to medical language. So you need to sort of set up over a period of time that language and the way you communicate medical information to and fro. Getting into risk factors, essentially what evidence shows us is 1 out of 2 runners will face some sort of running related injury on an annual basis. And these usually fall into the category of overuse injuries, where there is repetitive load on the tissues and there's breakdown of tissue resilience. Uh, Important point here is running injuries are always multifactorial. So if you sort of are able to identify a single risk factor, you don't need to jump guns. Uh, so all sort of risk factors, multiple risk factors, occurring under the right circumstances is when you have a potential for a running related injury to occur. So we'd categorize risk factors basically into 2 categories. So there will be intrinsic or the internal factors, which are essentially our biological characteristics, and the eccentric ones or the external factors, which are training load related or environment related. So getting into each, a previous history of injury is essentially the most important predictor for subsequent injury. But that's because you'll probably, even if you have rehabbed or you've not done your rehab properly, you'll end up with some sort of residual deficits which will alter the loading patterns during running. For example, if you look at let's say a client walks in with a 6-month-old ankle sprain, and you sort of get into assessment, it's very likely that you'll end up with some sort of deficit in the dorsiflexor strength. If you send them for an ultrasound, you'll probably see some change in tendon integrity. You'll have an increased girth at the Achilles tendon. And if you sort of try and test them for proprioception, you'll probably be able to identify some more deficits over there. Individual variations like the previous resource people have discussed will influence local tissue loading. For example, having excessive rear foot eversion or significant leg length discrepancies. Dynamic knee valgus is something that we sort of essentially look into, or having high arches or rigid arches. What these sort of do is they will alter your loading in the frontal and sagittal planes and end up getting some increased stresses around the patellofemoral joint or tibial torsion and sort of alter knee hip movements. What recent meta-analysis shows is that biomechanical factors alone are not something that can predict running related injuries, although the interaction with other risk factors then becomes important for you to be able to identify and work up a case scenario. Strength deficits in major muscle groups like the hip abductors, glutes, cores will impair shock absorption during running and result in compensatory loading patterns. Although a recent meta-analysis did find reduced knee extension strength and hip extension strength to be a factor to predict injuries in long distance runners. Mobility, both hypomobility and hypermobility will have negative impacts. For example, if someone has reduced dorsiflexion range, it will increase loading through the Achilles tendon and the plantar fascia. Excessive mobility also can impact the way your your muscles will function. So if you have hyperextension, let's say at the knee joint, you will have increased loading going through the quadriceps. Although mobility, evidence is mixed when it comes to mobility as a risk factor, but we are all aware that clinically it is quite relevant. As we grow old, there is a change in the tendon structure, in the vasculature, and you will find as in your older runners, you will end up having more sort of acute on chronic tendinopathies. Females tend to show more inclination towards patellofemoral syndromes, bone stress injuries, and that's probably got to do something with their hormonal environments and the difference in bone mineral densities, and the fact that you tend to see a lot more dynamic valgus in females on a usual basis. Having higher BMI will mean you are going to generate higher ground reaction forces when you run, so that's going to increase the joint stresses. Also, having higher BMIs essentially puts you in that state of a para-inflammation, which in itself is not great to be in. Rapid changes in training loads. So if there's a sudden and rapid jump in the training mileage or frequency, intensity over a short period of time, it essentially doesn't allow tissues to adapt, and there are higher chances of break in the tissue resilience and elevated injury risk. Having an excessively high weekly mileage, I mean, somewhere in the range of evidence says 60 to 65 kilometers a week is essentially puts you at risk. I mean, even though you might be, training for a while, but the whole idea is that the number of loading cycles on your bone will be high, which sort of ends up into micro damage building up over a period of time. This is especially true if you have it in combination with inadequate recovery. Shoe characteristics, we are all aware, will influence the magnitude and rate of impact forces. So your foot supination, pronation patterns, your foot ground interactions. More than which shoe, it's an inappropriate use of the shoe or abrupt change in the shoe. That's sort of a factor that you want to look at. So, for example, if someone is wearing shoes with poor cushioning or worn-out soles, someone who has a wide forefoot is using a narrow toe box. That's something that you need to look into. Abrupt transitions are something you'll have on an average amateur runners just find some new shoe model and just bring it in mid-season. That's a big no. Or if someone just decides one fine day to transition from a conventional to a minimalistic shoe, that will change the forces going to the joints. Hard and non-compliant surfaces mean there are higher vertical forces that go through the joint and will essentially end up increasing the joint stresses. Using cambered or irregular terrain essentially is will add to asymmetric loading and torsional stress. So this becomes essentially important in the newbie or runners who have a training age less than 2 years. Could also be a factor in seasoned runners. Let's say a marathoner just decides one fine day to start trail running, and you will end up because the surface is going to change, the forces will change as well. Poor training behaviors, poor sleep hygienes, poor hydration strategies, changing training strategies mid-season, having poor warm-ups, and an ability to sort of integrate cross-training into your training regime, where you sort of off the road as well, working on your strength as well, other than just building up mileage, and then ignoring the early signs of pain and early niggles. What it basically does is it disrupts the optimal load adaptation cycles and it diminishes your tissue resilience and hence it ends up putting you in an elevated injury risk. Now this biosocial lifestyle factors is something all physios are a bit aware of, but the medical fraternity sort of is still opening up to the idea. But if you have high allostatic loads, you have work stressors and personal life stressors that will have an impact on your performance as well. High consumption of alcohol and nicotine sort of puts you into that parainflammatory state to begin with, and then if you're trying to push on to that state, it elevates your injury risk. Poor nutrition or inadequate nutrition will affect your the energy availability. So if you have someone who comes up with low levels of vitamin D3 or B12, or you run a hormonal profile and you see iron deficiencies going on, it's something you need to look into. What it essentially does is it impairs bone turnover and tendon adaptation and hence sort of increases the risk for tissue breakdown. So we've looked at the risk factors, both intrinsic and extrinsic, but the major point here is that running injuries are always multifactorial in nature, and you need to be able to sort of hold yourself on putting up that pin of the grenade if you see one risk factor going on. And it's presence of multiple risk factors and their interactions under the right circumstances that potentially ends up into a running related injury. Finally, training load analysis. So basically, we've sort of just looked at that poor training load management is a major risk factor for running related injuries, and sports science teams all around the world are sort of trying to monitor the athlete loads using multiple approaches. So approaches can sort of be along the entire spectrum, right from subjective to pure objective ones. So you could just look at the wellness questionnaires, or you could look at session RPs. But the objective ones would be your smartwatches like Apple, Garmin. You have Whoop, which is quite popular these days, or the traditional advanced sensor-based technology, such as Polar or Catapult, something like that. What we've obviously seen is there's a heavy reliance on either the subjective or either the objective approach. But what actually works well is a mixed approach, because you're trying to target both the feedbacks, internal and external as well. So at an elite level, we have time and infrastructure to sort of do approach it both ways. But at a clinical setup, it becomes a bit difficult because of time and infra challenges. So that is where your acute to chronic workload ratio actually becomes feasible. It helps you gauge athletes' readiness to compete, helps plan periodization and then flag off injury risk. What essentially ACWR is, it's a ratio between your workload in the last 7 days versus your average weekly workload over 4 weeks, so a month basically. The acute component essentially represents the fatigue state of the athlete, and the chronic component represents the fitness state. So that's what it is. It's a ratio. End of the day, you're just dividing two elements. So how do you go about calculating it in a practical basis? Let's say, for example, you have an athlete who's run 30 kilometers fast in the last week and has an average weekly mileage of 28.5. You'll just divide 30 by 28.5, and that gives you 1.05, which essentially means that your athlete's training workload increased by 5% last week compared to the last 4 weeks. So this is the graph that's been used quite popular all across the world, presented by Tim Gabbett and team. Uh, it's a reference range we need to remember has been created using Australian rules, football, rugby, and baseball. So it may or may not apply to other sports, but it's essentially what's out there in literature at the moment. So if your athlete's ACWR is less than zero point 0.8 or is beyond 1.5, both the scenarios put your athlete into not being well prepared. If it's in the range of 0.8 to 1.3 is the optimal zone. So if you have an acute training load which is low and a chronic training load which is high, so high baseline fitness, your athlete is well prepared and is ready to push or can participate, is match ready. Whereas if your acute training load is quite high and the baseline fitness is low, then your athlete is ill prepared and he sort of needs to take a step back, recover, rest, build up, and then get into match fitness. Just a few examples. So I've kept the 4 weekly average standardized. It's 28.5. So let's say athlete A ran 12 kilometers. The ACWR comes down to 0.42, which is below 0.5. So the athlete is undertrained. And if he goes out and works at a higher intensity or sort of works at a higher training load, may well end up with an injury. Optimal zone is that 0.8 to 1.3. So that's the second example which we saw in the past as well. Lastly, if your athletes, let's say for example, ran 48 kilometers last week and had a baseline fitness of 28.5 on an average, the ACWR comes to 1.68, which is beyond 1.5, and the athlete is overtrained, so or is fatigued, or he or she needs to sort of recover and then come back to training. So in summary, being aware of red flags during subjective examination is an essential part of good clinical practice. Running related injuries are always multifactorial in nature. Do not pull the pin off the grenade if you see one thing go wrong. Acute to chronic workload ratio is a useful and clinically applicable tool for training load analysis. Structured history taking will better inform your formulation for working hypothesis and your list of differentials. And understanding your athlete goal is as important, if not more, than identifying the tissue pathology, because you need to sort of, many times we end up, just identifying what tissue is broken down and you try and address that, but you sort of end up missing the whole idea of why the athlete came to you and what was her or his end goal. Was it running a marathon? Was it getting back to competitive training? And there are many more factors other than just handling the tissue pathology that need to be addressed. So thank you, and we can take any questions needed.
Thanks.